We re-renting out your room to help with expenses. You can sleep on the couch until you figure out your situation, my mother announced as I limped through the front door on crutches, still wearing the hospital bracelet from my 3-week stay in the ICU. Your sister's boyfriend Derek needs a place, and he's willing to pay $400 a month. It just makes more sense. I stood in the living room of the house where I'd grown up, my left leg held together with titanium rods, my ribs still aching from the impact that had nearly killed me, watching my family make it clear that my recovery was less important than $400 and my sister's convenience. What they didn't understand, what they would eventually learn the hard way, was that the daughter they'd just relegated to the couch would rebuild her life so completely that when they came looking for help 3 years later she'd hand them a hotel brochure and close the door. The accident had happened on a Tuesday evening. I'd been driving home from my job at a marketing firm, a good job, one I'd worked hard to get after graduating with honors. A delivery truck had run a red light and T-boned my sedan at 40 miles per hour. I'd been extracted from the wreckage by firefighters and airlifted to a trauma center. The injuries were extensive: shattered femur, broken ribs, collapsed lung, traumatic brain injury that had kept me in a medically induced coma for 6 days. The doctors had told my parents I might not survive. Then they'd told them I might not walk. Then they'd told them I might have permanent cognitive damage. I'd beaten every prediction. 3 weeks after the accident, I was discharged with a walker, a mountain of medical bills, and instructions for months of physical therapy. I'd expected to come home to support and love. Instead, I came home to a couch. Derek moved into my room the day after I arrived. He was 23, same age as me, and had been dating my sister Melanie for about 4 months. He worked part-time at a sporting goods store and spent most of his energy on his music career, which seemed to consist primarily of smoking weed and playing video games. My room, the room where I'd lived for 18 years before moving out for college, the room I'd returned to temporarily while saving for an apartment, was now his. "It's not personal," Melanie said when I confronted her. "Derek needed a place, and you weren't using the room." I was in a coma. I was literally fighting for my life. "Yeah, but you're fine now." And Derek was about to be homeless. What were we supposed to do? Wait until I was recovered enough to have a conversation? Ask if I minded? Treat me like a member of this family instead of an inconvenience? Melanie had shrugged, already bored with the conversation. "You're being dramatic. It's just a room." The couch became my world for the next 3 months. I slept there, ate there, did my physical therapy exercises there. I watched my family step over me on their way to their bedrooms. I listened to Derek and Melanie laughing behind my closed door, my space, now occupied by a man who contributed nothing except complaints about the Wi-Fi. My parents made it clear that my presence was tolerated, not welcomed. "The medical bills are putting a strain on everyone," my father said one evening when I asked about getting a bed at least. "We can't afford extras right now. My insurance is covering most of it." "Most isn't all. And you're not working." I wasn't working because I couldn't work. I could barely walk to the bathroom without help. The cognitive effects of my brain injury made concentration difficult. But in my family's calculation, my inability to contribute financially made me less deserving of basic comfort. "I'll pay rent," I offered desperately. "Whatever Derek is paying. More. Derek already has the room. We can't just kick him out." "But you could kick me out of my room while I was in the hospital?" "That was different. You weren't using it." The circular logic was impenetrable. I stopped trying to argue. The turning point came 4 months after the accident. I'd regained most of my mobility, walking with a cane instead of crutches, climbing stairs without assistance. My brain had healed enough that I could read for extended periods, focus on complex tasks, think about the future. And I'd received a settlement offer from the trucking company. The amount was significant, $847,000, structured to cover my medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. My lawyer had negotiated aggressively, and the trucking company, facing clear liability and bad publicity, had agreed to settle rather than go to trial. I told no one in my family. Not because I was being secretive, but because they'd never asked. In 4 months of living on their couch, not once had anyone inquired about the legal case, the insurance situation, the practical details of recovering from a near-fatal accident. They hadn't asked because they didn't care. So I made plans without them. The day I moved out was unremarkable to everyone except me. I'd found an accessible apartment, first floor, wide doorways, grab bars in the bathroom. I'd hired movers to transport my belongings, which amounted to whatever I could claim from my old room, not much. Derek and Melanie had reorganized most of my things into the garage, where water damage had destroyed half of them. "Where are you going?" my mother asked when she saw the moving truck. "My own place." "You can afford that?" "Yes. But your injury, you're still recovering." "I'll recover better somewhere I'm not sleeping on a couch." We did the best we could, Meredith. We're not a wealthy family. You're charging Derek $400 a month for my room. That's not poverty, that's priorities. And I wasn't one of them. I left without saying goodbye to my father or sister. There was nothing left to say. The next 3 years were transformation. The settlement money gave me foundation, but what I built with it came from something deeper, a determination to prove that the family who discarded me had made a catastrophic mistake. I started a marketing consulting business from my apartment, leveraging the skills I'd developed before the accident. Remote work was ideal for my ongoing recovery, and I threw myself into it with fierce dedication. The cognitive challenges I faced became advantages in disguise. I learned to break complex problems into manageable pieces, to document everything, to build systems that didn't rely on perfect memory. These adaptations made me a better consultant than I'd ever been as an employee. The business grew. I hired my first employee after 8 months, then a second, then a team of 5. I landed contracts with mid-sized companies who couldn't afford major agencies but needed professional marketing strategy. By year 2, I was making more than I'd ever earned in my old job. By year 3, I was buying a house. The house was everything I'd ever wanted, a craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch, 3 bedrooms, a home office with built-in bookshelves, a backyard garden. It needed work, cosmetic updates, a new roof, landscaping, but it was mine. I paid cash. The closing was scheduled for a Friday in September, 3 years and 2 months after the accident. I signed the papers with steady hands, shook hands with my real estate agent, and walked through my empty new home imagining the life I'd build there. That Sunday, my parents showed up. I hadn't seen them since I'd moved out. 3 years of silence, no calls, no texts, no birthday cards. When my business had been featured in a local business journal, I'd wondered if they might reach out. They hadn't. When I'd won an award from the Chamber of Commerce, I'd half expected a congratulatory message. Nothing. Now they were on my porch, looking older and somehow smaller, their faces arranged in expressions I didn't recognize at first. Then I understood, they were nervous. Maybe even scared. "Meredith," my mother said. "We heard you bought a house. Word travels fast. We wanted to see you. To talk." I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway, my home behind me, and waited. "Things have been difficult," my father said. "The economy. Your mother's health. We lost the house 6 months ago." "I'm sorry to hear that. We've been staying with your Aunt Linda, but that's not working out. She's selling her place, moving to Arizona." He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what came next. "We were hoping, since you have this big house now, maybe we could stay with you. Just temporarily. Until we get back on our feet." I let the silence stretch. "Where's Melanie?" "She and Derek are staying with his parents. They don't have room for us." "Derek's parents have room for him but not for you?" "They have a small house. 2 bedrooms." "I see. So we thought, family helps family, right? That's what we always taught you." I laughed, not a cruel laugh, but not a kind one either. It was the laugh of someone hearing a punchline 3 years too late. "Wait here," I said. I walked to my home office, my beautiful, sun-filled home office with the built-in bookshelves, and retrieved something from my desk. Then I returned to the porch and handed it to my mother. "A hotel brochure. What is this?" "Options for your temporary housing situation. There are several extended stay places that offer weekly rates." "You're not going to let us stay here?" "No. But we're your family. You were my family when I came home from the hospital after nearly dying. You told me to sleep on the couch. You gave my room to my sister's boyfriend while I was still learning to walk again." I kept my voice steady, but the emotion beneath it was vast. "You never asked how I was doing. You never visited after I moved out. You never called, never wrote, never showed any interest in my life until you needed something. We made mistakes. You made choices. Every day for 4 months, you chose to prioritize Derek's $400 over your daughter's recovery. Every day for 3 years, you chose not to reach out. Those were choices, and choices have consequences. Meredith, please. I have 3 bedrooms in this house. A guest room with a beautiful view of the garden. But that room isn't for people who treated me like a burden when I was at my lowest. It's for the friends who actually helped me, who drove me to physical therapy, who brought me groceries, who sat with me on bad days when the pain was overwhelming." My mother was crying now. My father was staring at his shoes. "We're sorry. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. You didn't care enough to realize. That's worse. Can't you forgive us? We're your parents." "I forgave you years ago. Holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It doesn't mean opening my home to people who showed me exactly how much I meant to them when it mattered." I stepped back into my doorway. "The couch isn't available either." I closed the door. They stood on the porch for nearly an hour. I watched them through the window, my mother crying, my father pacing, both of them seemingly unable to process what had just happened. Eventually, they got in their car and drove away. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I felt sad, a deep, aching sadness for the relationship we could have had, should have had, if they'd made different choices. But I also felt peace. For 3 years, I'd wondered what I would do if this moment came. Whether I'd cave to family pressure, whether guilt would override self-respect, whether the child who grown up in that house would override the woman who rebuilt herself after it. Now I knew. Melanie called the next day. Mom said you refused to let them stay with you. That's correct. How could you do that? They're homeless. They're not homeless. They have options, Aunt Linda's until she sells, extended stay hotels, rental apartments. They have social security income. They're not destitute. You have a 3-bedroom house. You could help them. Could. Won't. This is because of the room thing? Still? That was years ago. That was 3 years ago, and it's not just the room thing. It's the message the room thing sent. That I wasn't important. That my recovery didn't matter. That my place in the family was conditional on not inconveniencing anyone. You're being petty. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Mom's been crying for 2 days. I cried for months on that couch, Melanie. Nobody noticed. So this is revenge? This is boundaries. I'm not responsible for people who couldn't be bothered to care about me. That includes you, by the way. In 3 years, how many times have you called? Silence. That's what I thought. I hung up. 6 months after that conversation, my father called. They'd found an apartment, small, affordable, manageable on their fixed income. My mother's health had stabilized. They were okay. I wanted to apologize, he said. Really apologize. Not just because we wanted something from you. I appreciate that. Your mother and I talked a lot after that day on your porch. About what we did. About why we did it. About the family we became when things got hard. What conclusions did you reach? That we were scared and selfish. That we saw you as a burden instead of a daughter who needed us. That we took the easy path instead of the right one. His voice cracked. That we failed you when you needed us most. Yes. You did. I don't expect you to forgive us. I told you, I already forgave you. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Trust is. You showed me who you are when crisis hit. I can't unsee that. Is there any way forward? Any way to rebuild? I thought about it carefully. Maybe. In time. But not by pretending nothing happened. Not by jumping straight to family dinners and holiday cards. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built slowly, honestly, with full acknowledgement of what happened. How do we start? You already did. By calling to apologize without asking for anything. That's new. 2 years have passed since that phone call. The relationship with my parents is developing. We talk monthly now, short conversations, careful and honest. They visited the house twice, for dinner, and left when the evening ended. No staying over. No assumptions. It's not the relationship I had with them before. It's not the relationship I wanted as a child. But it's something, a fragile connection built on truth rather than obligation. Melanie remains distant, which I've accepted. Some relationships can't be rebuilt, and not every family member deserves the effort of trying. Derek, for the record, moved out of my old room about 6 months after I left. He and Melanie broke up spectacularly, and he's since been arrested twice for minor drug offenses. My parents lost their $400 monthly income and never recovered financially, a direct line from their choices to their consequences. The guest room in my house has hosted many people over the years. Friends who needed a place to crash after difficult breakups. Colleagues visiting from out of town. A physical therapist who became a close friend, who drove me to appointments for 2 years and never asked for anything in return. Those are the people who earned that space. Who showed up when it mattered. Who treated me like a person worth caring about. My parents showed up too, just 3 years too late and only when they needed something. I gave them a hotel brochure. The couch wasn't available either. Some people will call that cruel. I call it clarity. When you're broken and bleeding, the people who offer you their couch show you their hearts. When you're healed and thriving, the people who suddenly want back and show you their hands. I learned to tell the difference. And I learned that family is a verb, not just a noun. You earn it through action. My parents didn't. And my guest room stays empty until someone does.